We actually even had to reduce the sales teams. You actually had less people doing more with less, not trying to just work harder or just keep hiring employees. We went from being flatlined to 20% increase. When you start winning, your confidence goes up. You stop chasing deals. By opening up our offering, that was a big game changer.
High activity doesn't always lead to high growth. At one point, our guest today was leading a team that was working harder than ever, yet revenue had completely plateaued. They were chasing volume while their departments were out of sync, leading to wasted effort and stalled momentum. Instead of simply demanding more hustle, he led a pivot that synchronized product, sales, marketing, and the customer experience, resulting in a transformation that took an 8-figure business and quadrupled the revenue. Today, he shares how getting clear on the right metrics and following a few simple strategies set his business on a path towards 9 figures. Welcome to today's episode of Your Business Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Shapiro, author of Your Business Growth Playbook, and my guest today is Shawn Boehme. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeremy. Great to be here.
So let's go back to the start. I always love hearing these origin stories. How did you get your first start in this whole world of unified communications and cloud solutions?
Oh, yeah. So that goes all the way back to 2010. I was introduced to a tiny company. Nobody had ever heard of it, called Nextiva. And in fact, I was introduced by the security guard because he said, "Hey, there's this company in Scottsdale. I know that you're in sales. You should go there." And so I was like, heck yeah. It was way back in 2010, right? So nobody was hiring in 2010. And so I got introduced to a tiny company called Nextiva. I was one of the first employees there. And that's how I got introduced into what we call cloud PBX, or business phone systems. And at that point in time, it was going through a big transition because the internet was becoming more available, more solid. And because of that, you could do more things in the cloud. And so cloud communications was just taking off at the time. Fast forward to 2015, and I was introduced to Pantera Networks. Pantera had a very exciting story because not only were they the service provider, like actually taking care of the customers and offering the customers the technology, but they were the technology provider too, which meant that I would be able to have input on what my customers want in their phone system and some of the customizations that I just didn't have at Nextiva. And so that's why I was excited to go to Pantera in 2015. And then this entire migration, I think the migration to the cloud started in 2010, but then with COVID and everybody having to work from home, it just went from maybe being in the 3rd inning to being in the 7th inning. And it just pushed everything forward. So everybody knew, hey, the cloud is the future. We've got to get our phone system in the cloud. And that's propelled me in my career. But that's the backstory. It was literally a security guard that introduced me to this new vertical, and it's been fantastic for me and my family.
You know, it's funny when we look back in that rear view, we see clear as day those dots that connected the past events to where we are now. But in the moment or looking forward, it's often so hard to see what those are. And it comes down to many times getting out there like you did, having those conversations, getting to know people. And that's where those real world life-changing connections come from. So I love that you had that conversation with that security guard. So in terms of timing, you know, the world's had our whole analog phone systems and that whole, industry for ages. And you've been helping to lead this digital transformation from the analog to, voice over IP, VoIP, and the more digital side of things. Why Pantera? Why them?
I like the fact that Pantera can control its own future because it is the technology provider. There's 2 types of VoIP companies that are out there. There's the VoIP companies that will go and just resell somebody else's licenses. For example, AT&T, huge company, right? You would think that they would build their own platform, but they didn't. All they're doing is they're just reselling RingCentral's platform, and they just rebranded it. So they're using their distribution and their reach, but they're not really wanting to get into building the technology itself. What excited me about Pantera was that they could actually control the technology. And so when a customer had some issues or wanted to do things a very specific way, they could tweak it and they could make it work for that specific customer. So that was really what was exciting. Back in 2015, when I came on to Pantera, I didn't even know that was possible. I just thought, yeah, a phone system's a phone system, and you just got to sell that phone system.
And you guys did sell that darn phone system. There was a lot of early growth in those days. What was that early growth like as you're helping these companies convert over? It's unusual to be at this inflection point where you can upgrade companies so well. So like bring us back to that growth and what that was all like.
Yeah, and the growth was amazing. I mean, I think year over year growth was somewhere around 25 to 35%. It was just every single year you're growing in the double digits. And we basically rode, because Pantera is a privately held organization. And so we had to have a philosophy in place. And so our philosophy was, let's own the technology, let's be the most reliable and the best technology, and then let's let our brand speak for itself. Let's go after referrals, let's try to get reviews. Let's not just go buy leads, go spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on leads. We'll just get a technology so strong and so reliable that people will want to use it. And that was a great model when everybody was moving to the cloud and it was a big requirement or a big need. And so we had that growth, and that growth was fantastic until about 2020 when the pandemic hit.
So catch us up to what happened then. You guys had this double digit year over year growth, which I think is so oft idealized and sought after by founders and businesses, right? And then things slowed and plateaued. Team was still busy though. What happened then?
Team was extremely busy. In fact, I had hired even more people because I just wanted to keep that growth going. And my natural thought process was, well, if you want to do more, you got to hire more. So we actually added to the sales team. But there were some big challenges that had just occurred because of the pandemic. Zoom became an actual verb in the pandemic, right? So you went from this little known brand company out of Silicon Valley that did some video conferencing, but they're not that special. And then everybody knew about Zoom. And it's like, oh, I'm having a Zoom party. So think of this, it was incredible how that brand blew up. And so it just naturally took a lot of people over there to their phone system that they had just launched. And then the other one was Teams. So Microsoft had Teams since 2018, but nobody had ever used Teams. It wasn't, people weren't doing video conferencing. That wasn't how you met people. So it wasn't really, nobody had adapted to it. And then because of the pandemic and because Teams was already part of the technology stack, then Teams started to get a place. So in the pandemic, what basically happened is our competitors at the time, like Ring Central, Vonage Business, 8x8, they all took a hit, and then Zoom and Teams just blew up, just incredible adoption rate. And so even though we had hired more and more people, we did more and more work. We were buying more and more leads. We were reaching out to our customers, trying to get more reviews. We had plateaued, and the growth wasn't there at all.
So you're hiring more. And, as we know, each salesperson you bring on has a window until they're up to speed and actually productive, but they're almost working against the tides, right? What was that like for the team when you were throwing more bodies at the problem and even the existing team is becoming less effective? What was that like leadership wise, team wise?
Yeah. And that's a great question, because sales is a good salesperson wants to feel like they can win. And that when you win, that gives you just enough excitement and motivation to go chase the next win. And so when you're losing and you're being told, oh yeah, well, my boss knew about Teams, so we went with Teams, or well, Zoom, I can't get fired if I go with Zoom. It had a negative effect, almost like a negative spiral in a way. And so trying to keep the guys motivated and keep them hunting, that was a challenge. And then also inside the technology space in 2021, I don't know if it hit all verticals, but in our space, Wall Street came with just bags of money. And when Wall Street came with bags of money, people were able to jump ship from my team to a competitor's team and get a 30% bump in pay. And so I had those challenges coming at me in 2021, which was we're not winning as much. And then the guys that were really successful, they were moving on and getting big paydays.
Are you enjoying this episode? Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. That'll help you get more episodes automatically as soon as they come out. So hit that subscribe button right now. And if you have a minute, leave a quick rating and review. That helps support the show. So I'm hearing a few things there. One is that it was harder to close deals. Two, you're hiring and trying to onboard folks in that environment. And three, your heaviest hitters, your best sales team members, they're getting poached and paid far more than you guys are able to do by these freshly minted funded companies. So what happens when you have like that kind of turmoil in a sales team? How do you lead that and get them through that?
Back to what is it that the market wants? That was the biggest question that we had to redefine. Where is our place in the market? What does the market want? And is there a better offer that we can put together for our market? So first, go back to our customers. We have customers that have been with us 10, 12 years. And so we went back to those customers. Why are you sticking with Pantera? What is it that you like? Getting our messaging correct. We actually let go of the director of marketing at that time, and that responsibility fell on my shoulders. But I actually thought that was a benefit, because instead of marketing and sales fighting back and forth about who our ICP was, we were able to clearly define the ICP, and then the feedback loop between sales and marketing got really short because I was doing both. The biggest thing that we heard from the market was we need to offer different seat types. And there was one type of seat type that we weren't even offering at the time that we knew if we could get there, it would actually bring in a lot more revenue. And so in 2022, we went from a single seat that included everything. We put everything in that seat, and then we turned it into 4 separate seats and created the 4th seat was actually a new seat called Contact Center. And so, as software and telecom, they just kind of merged together. More and more organizations wanted the same agent. If the person called in, they want that agent to take that call. But if that person made a comment on social media, or that person went to the web chat and started responding, or if the person sent in an email, they didn't want that to go to different groups and have multiple agents working with the same customer. They wanted the system to automatically send all of that information, all of that communication to the single agent that was assigned to that customer. And so by opening up our offering to include that omni-channel contact center seat, that was a big game changer for us as well. And that was right around that 2021, 2022 timeframe.
So I'm hearing a few things that I want to highlight for our listeners. One is you mentioned ICP, or ideal client profile. This is something we talk about a number of times in the book. If you don't know who you're selling to, how can you effectively sell to them? Especially challenging is if there's different perspectives on who that ideal customer is. The second thing I'm hearing ties right to that, which is this alignment issue, that until you had, your hand in multiple departments, there were differing directions that sales, marketing, customer experience, all of this is pursuing. And you were able to start bringing some of this together. And this is a classic division in companies, that sales is selling one thing, right? That's different than what's marketing, that different than what marketing is talking about. And it's different than what product is making. So how did you get all of these parties like on that same page, the same ICP, the same product plan, the same vision? Like, how'd you lead that?
It starts in technology. It starts with product. And so we have an amazing VP of product, and I started breadcrumbs, I guess is a good way of saying it. But every opportunity that I had to meet with him, I actually brought him real case scenarios of why we were losing. What did the competition have? What do we need to put into our product that's missing? And over time, it didn't happen immediately, but getting those small wins and one of the big, I think at the beginning, when I came to him, the first thing that we did is we wanted a API for our faxing service. You don't think faxing's that important, but our core ICP where we did really well was inside of the healthcare space. And one of the most frustrating things for a healthcare company is that they have an ERP system, but they would literally pay somebody to take the digital faxes and upload them and save them into their medical records system. And what they wanted was just a simple API. Hey, if Pantera gets a fax, can you just push it over to our software? Seems really simple. The fact that we were even talking about fax, right? That's not very sexy, but that's what our client wanted. That's what the ICP wanted. And so that was the very first win that I got with my VP of product and saying, if you will build this, then we can close more deals inside of the healthcare space. And he built it. He got it done within 90 days, tested it, brought it out. We brought it back to 3 of our customers that we have a really close relationship who were asking for it. They loved it. They wanted to tell people about it. And getting that one win with product, because there's nothing worse for product than like they build something and then nobody sells it. And they're just like, man, I spent all that time building that and nobody wants it. But because it was the exact opposite results and that they immediately got results from making that product, they realized that if they take the feedback from sales who has their ear to the ground, we're going to be able to have a more robust, a better product that our verticals that we're chasing or our ICP wants. And so that is how I was able to bridge that gap and bring him into my world so that he could see what the customers were asking for. And then him having the confidence that I wasn't going to just put him on a wild goose chase for a product that nobody was going to use.
Nice. So I hear 3 important things there. One is I love that answer and how immediately you knew what that was, which was product first, right? Let product lead the way and everything else follows. The second thing I'm hearing there is a lot of that was customer led, right? You were hearing what your prospects were looking for that would close deals and what existing customers wanted. And that helped you guys to do the third thing, which is to find that niche. And that lets you niche into some of these verticals. So beautifully done. Now, as you found these niches in these verticals, you touched on this a little bit earlier, these different tiers of service versus just selling one seat and that's that. How did the decision to add in these different levels of service impact the dollar amount for each of the transactions you had and the number of new accounts you guys were able to bring on board?
Yeah, so we went from being flatlined to being able to jump back into a 20% increase in the following year. It actually, because we broke up our seat type and we gave an entry level point that was lower than what we were used to selling, but we made up for that because the contact center seat was 4 times more value than the seat that we were selling. So if we were selling a seat for $20, that contact center seat is $85. So the revenue came in. So the seat amounts that we were selling, they didn't increase by 20%, but the revenue increased because we were able to get to a higher tier and offer a more robust product that allowed us to bring in that kind of revenue. And that's an incredible story, because if you can add additional revenue without having to add more seats or more users, then your cost of actually taking care of that customer goes really low. And so that really changed it for us as we were coming out of COVID, and that we were able to jump into the contact center vertical and really start to do really well.
Yeah, I want to highlight for our listeners, what Shawn and I are talking about here is if you have like one tier of service, a strategy I love to use that you guys did beautifully here is you can add higher levels of service where customers pay you more per month for something more. You can add lower levels so they can become customers earlier and easier at a lower price point. And if you already have multiple levels, you can add levels or service tiers in between your existing offerings. So you guys went from that one offering to four, moving both up and down. That serves you really well.
Oh, I was going to say, and also in that same period of time, because we had plateaued, I had to make some hard decisions, and so we actually even had to reduce the sales team. So going into, 2023, 2024, we actually had less people than what we had going back in 2020. So doing more with less was a big part of that as well. Not trying to just work harder or just keep hiring employees. Uh, we were able, because we just changed the product type and we changed the pricing and the offer. That's what allowed us to be successful, which is counterintuitive than what you would expect.
Yeah, I think sometimes when companies hear about this idea of like increasing a price, right, that can be scary. But like the key in all this stuff is always value-based pricing, right? You guys, for example, started listening to your customers, adding in more of the functionality they're looking for, delivering more benefits, and at the end of the day, a lot more value, and that can command a higher price point that customers are happy to pay because of the value that's there. That also lets you differentiate from all those other companies you were talking about that were competing in sort of that bloodbath red ocean of a space you were in.
You're right. We always say try to find blue ocean and clear waters. So anything that you can do to differentiate yourself, your sales team will love it because it gives them something to talk about.
Absolutely. So speaking of the team, what were some of the challenges you faced in reducing the size of your sales team to make sure that all of your reps were working at their peak efficiency?
Up until 2020, we had just focused on direct sales. That was really the core focus, which that was two verticals inside of the technology field that we really weren't touching. One of those is channel. So inside of telecom, there are MSPs and technology brokers and the trusted advisors. These are all types of people that are actually out there on their own, building relationships with businesses and then offering their consulting services to bring in technology. And so we had always looked at the channel almost like a competitiveness, because there would be times where we would have a direct sell. They came to our website, they wanted us, but then they talked to a telecom broker, and that broker had brought in two or three competitors. And so it had always been this conflict in between direct sales and channel. And we made a pivot and realized that no, we need that. What the channel cares about is a reliable technology company that's not going to sell vaporware, that's going to stand behind their product, and that's going to treat their customer right. And so we actually started looking at channel as not necessarily a competitor, but maybe more as like a lead source. So if we invest into the channel, if we build really strong relationships with these telecom brokers or technology brokers, then they in tune would want to bring opportunities to us. And so we just put them on the line card, almost like another lead source, and treated them like that. And we took our sales guys who were used to working their own deals and allowed them to start working deals with those partners, which is not typical inside of technology. Normally you have a dedicated team that's going to work with the channel, and then you have a dedicated inside sales team. The advantage that it gave us, though, was our sales guys know how to speak to the different stakeholders in the sales cycle. That may not be something that the telecom broker really understands. And so instead of just having a guy on the phone that's a relationship guy, the technology broker had a sales guy who knew how to ask the right questions, get to the right answers, really uncover the real needs of the client. And so we just stood out in the channel compared to our competition, because they knew that when they brought us the lead, it was going to be handled correctly and that we were going to learn everything about that customer. And so we created a hybrid between direct sales and channel with zero conflict. So if a channel partner came to us and said, "Hey, I know you're working this deal. Are you willing to let me work it with you?" We would just absolutely work it with them. And so we got rid of any type of conflict between direct sales and channel. And then our third was wholesale. And we looked into some of these, similar to, I brought up that point about AT&T reselling RingCentral's product. But because we are the technology provider, then we could do something similar where if we have a local MSP and they want to start branding their phone system so it has their brand on it, then they could do that with us through our wholesale relationship. So we opened up from just being focused on direct sales to more channels. And then we treated those channels almost like they were lead sources. And again, trying to do it a little bit different than the competition.
So I'm hearing you were able to do something that most business owners and companies find really challenging, which is this prioritization and figuring out what to do first. You guys went back almost to the drawing board to build product to create that blue ocean away from the red ocean. Simultaneously, you're overhauling your account management and your sales strategy. You're bringing on channel partners. You're rolling out 4 new tiers of service. Like, you jumped into all this at once. How did you manage to balance that investment of time, resources, leadership across these 5+ different initiatives simultaneously?
Having a really good leadership on those roles. So, and not just that, but we also launched customer engagement at the same time because we wanted our customers to have quarterly business reviews with an account manager to make sure that we were hearing back from our customers what they wanted. But that all comes down to direct leadership over those verticals. So we brought in somebody specifically in the channel, and their core focus was to make sure that the sales guys that I was also managing were doing what they needed to do on their reaching out to brokers and making sure they knew about us. And so we brought in almost like a director level person, and that was their core focus. I'm just going to work on this. I'm going to build this up. And they knew exactly what they had to do. Similar with customer engagement. We brought in Saul Hurtado and built out an entire account underneath her. And she owns that account. She reports back, but the day-to-day, the initiatives, what she's responsible for, she owns 100%. And so I think it's a matter of finding somebody who's got that entrepreneurial spirit. They want to own it. They want to build something. And then you put them in a role that allows them to go and build it. And then as long as you're consistent and you're checking in and you're holding them accountable and you're letting them, you're guiding them, but you're not micromanaging them, they can have incredible success. So I think it really comes down to the talent that you can find and making sure that they have some of like those intangibles that you just can't put into somebody. They have it or they don't. And one of those is just ownership. Like, this is my team. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to hit that goal, and they're going to do everything in their power to hit that goal.
It's interesting when I talk to 6-figure business owners, they're usually still trying to figure out their messaging, their market, their product, all these things. 7-figure business owners are often building out their team and starting to scale that way. As you talk to 8 going on 9-figure business owners, the theme that is always there that I'm hearing so strongly here, Shawn, is leadership, ownership, teams. That's really what gets you to that scale. And, when I look at how you guys have grown, 4Xing, right, from previous size, so much that seems to come down to team, leadership, ownership, and so on. What do you think was like the most significant turning point, in that 4X journey?
Product, because at the end of the day, a sales guy is only as good as the product that he sells and how that's actually helping the end customer. That's the benefit of being in technology sales. You're not a used car salesman. You don't want to sell to everybody. You have a very specific purpose in what you're offering and what you're trying to fix. And so if product does the right thing and they really understand who the end customer is and they build a solution that matches up to those pain points, then a really good salesperson can sell that and have a lot of success. And so I truly think that when we went back to the drawing board and we looked at our customer and we said, who is Pantera built for? And why do they love us? And why are they going to stay? And why are they going to keep paying us? And once we figured that out, then that was our North Star. And then product could do everything towards that North Star. And then that just alleviated all of that burden that had fallen onto sales because, again, it's either a downward spiral or an upward spiral in sales. And when you start winning, your confidence goes up, you start feeling less needy, you stop chasing deals, and you start really qualifying people to make sure that their needs match up to what you can solve. And so I always say, at least inside of technology, product, product, product. And so if product knows what they're doing and what they're building and why they're building and who they're building for, then you can have a lot of its success inside of the technology space.
Well said, Shawn. So you guys moved to these multiple tiers of service. You dialed in your ICP and niched so much better. How have a lot of these changes you've been talking about, how did that impact like your close rates and the overall size of your deals that you guys were doing?
And our close rates have actually even increased more because one of the things that we did recognize is that during the pandemic, you had two really big brands. You had Zoom and you had Teams. What's unique about Teams is they actually have an app store that you can live in, and you can build an app specifically for your customers that are already living inside of Teams. And so we built that app knowing that our customers were already inside of Teams. And so it's like, why fight it if you just figure out a way to join them and figure out to get your product where your customers want it to be. When we weren't growing and we were plateaued, we would say yes to every lead that would come in, and we were just chasing like our revenue. We were just almost like feeling like we were commoditized. So, hey, you're just a phone system, so I only want to pay X. Will you drop your rates so that that really affected us in a negative way because we were chasing smaller deals. We were chasing deals that only cared about reducing cost, and we didn't have a really good story to tell about the value we were bringing them other than reducing their price. And so ever since we made those changes, our close rates are back up. So on an inbound call, when somebody knows about Pantera and they reach out to us, our closing percentage is about 50%. On an outbound lead where we've nurtured it through like an account-based marketing program, or we've been doing cold calling or whatever it might be, then those close ratios are hovering just under 20% at the time. Telecom is one of the most brutal verticals out there. So those types of closing ratios are incredible.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And I think that speaks to the quality of the team members, leadership, and so on. But also to a key point you just made there, which was that as you guys niched and differentiated, no longer were you a commodity, but now you were your own unique thing that no one else competes with. And anytime we take our business and we make it a market of one, our company, there's no competition. You get to command price, you get to, have those higher close rates and so forth. So, all right, given that you guys are a recurring revenue-based business, a question I always love to drill into is churn, right? So how have these changes impacted your churn rate? Now that you have account management team as the primary driver of new sales, you've dialed in your service offerings, you have multiple tiers. How did all these changes impact churn?
Churn was one of the biggest fears that I had going into 2020. And even my leader told me, hey, don't worry about churn. Churn's going to happen. But when you're not winning as much and every single customer that you sign on is paying less than the customer that's leaving, that's not a good feeling. That doesn't give you confidence in where we were going. And so our churn rates have come at the time, like in 2020, we were about 8%, which is really good in our industry. That had a lot to do with people willing to commit to it. That was monthly. That was a monthly churn rate. So that's why Saul and her team were created, because one of the things that we heard when we were going back to our customers and really learning about what they wanted to receive from Pantera, one of the things that we heard was, after onboarding, we never heard from you. Like once we got done, we never heard from you. So when you brought out a new product or when you had a new offering, we never heard from you. And so we knew that we had to change that. And so we have been just focused on our core customers. And once we land a customer, making sure that they know how valuable they are to us. And so we've been able to reduce those churn rates by half by implementing Saul's team. We still are in a technology space. There's still going to be churn. People are going to have certain needs that maybe we don't fit for them, or there's mergers, there's acquisitions, things like that. But what has changed, and not only were we able to help churn rate, but recently now, people that have left one company and gone to another company are actually coming to us again and saying, "Hey, Pantera, we loved you over at company X. We want you to be over here at company Y." And so that's been a benefit of, even though maybe some of those companies that still churn, when an actual employee knows Pantera and loves Pantera because of the relationship that we built, and they move on to a new organization, we get introduced to those organizations as well.
So when you guys had that 8% monthly churn, am I understanding that over the course of 12 months, you've effectively replaced your entire customer base?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what was going on back in 2020 and 2021 when everybody was moving to Teams and everybody was moving to Zoom.
Yeah, we talk about, if you're in a recurring revenue business, like for example, SaaS, membership, continuity, so forth, churn reduction as a strategy can increase revenue so much, right? Like you guys cut that churn down from 8% to 4%, meaning customers are staying with you twice as long, meaning customer lifetime value is about twice as high. And all that had nothing to do with getting a new customer. It was all about keeping the existing customers you worked so hard to acquire. So good. And a piece you touched on there I want to highlight for our listeners as well is the staying in touch with your customers, having a relationship, letting them know what you're working on, what's going on, and so forth. Just staying in touch is a great strategy to reduce that churn.
And even if you don't have the resources to get a full-time head, but if you could even hire a part-time person to do that, it's worth it. That's one of the quickest areas in a business to be able to have an immediate impact on what you're trying to do. That feedback loop is so important, and hearing it directly from your customer base to yourself and then making the right changes will get you to the next level quicker than most other parts of better than going and hiring more sales guys, or better than going and hiring more, buying more leads. Sometimes people just think like, I just need more. But if you actually look at your customer base and you really communicate with them and you invest in them, you're going to get a lot more out of it.
Yeah. Once you're past like the 7-figure business mark, there's so much value within your existing customer base that you don't have to do anything different on the customer acquisition side to grow your business tremendously. Sure, you can, but there's so much more you can do with the leads and customers you're already working with. And that's the stuff I love doing, is finding those small hinges that swing the big doors. So beautifully done. All right. So speaking of advice, if you were talking to a business owner or someone leading their team and they were finding a sales team burnout or chasing the wrong metrics, like what advice would you have for someone in that spot?
Yeah, I would make sure that you're looking at revenue over units. That was a big thing for us. So way back in the day when I got here, we were graded based off of how many new seats that we brought in. You've got to get away from that seat metric, especially when you try to bring in a more valuable offering. And so make sure that when you're looking at your stats, you're not looking at units as much as you're looking at revenue. I think that's a big item. Some more advice is that feedback loop. Close the feedback loop. Try to not have it be so siloed. We had marketing pitching a completely different product to a completely different buyer who we weren't closing in sales. And so once we got that fixed and we knew exactly who we were going after and we made sure that marketing was speaking to that customer, we had success. And then ultimately, never forget who your customer is, what they expect from you, what they want from you. And then if you can stay in that mindset, there's a lot of outside forces, and you may see a competitor doing a certain thing, or you may see in your industry certain, trends. You may feel like you need to chase those trends. But unless you verify that with your clients, at least unless you have those communications with your clients on what they really care about, you could be wasting a lot of time and resources on a trend that's not going to be there in a year or two. So always go back to that true source, which is your customer. And that's why that communication with your customer is so important.
So speaking of hindsight, knowing what you know now, looking back, what would you have done differently as you were, first setting out about dealing with this plateau and getting back to the growth?
I would have immediately had started with a customer engagement team, knowing what I know now. It kind of hurt to hear that customers felt like once we got them through onboarding, we never talked to them again. And so I would definitely have changed that back in 2016. If I could have brought in, while we were even having great growth, right? Like we were super happy and super successful, but had I thought about bringing in a customer engagement team at that time, what would it have been different like when we did plateau? Did we spend a lot of money on services and solutions that didn't really move the needle? So even if you're having success, just always be trying to think about keeping in communication with your customers. Because in hindsight being 2020, if I had implemented a customer engagement team way back in 2016, I think that we could have heard back from our customers what they used, what they didn't use, and we could have pivoted 6 years sooner than when we actually pivoted.
Nice. All right. Before we wrap, Shawn, a few quick rapid fire questions I love to ask. If you had to start all over again from scratch, what one lead source would you go all in on?
In today's world, I think that more and more people are going to get their information from AI. And so I would do everything that I could to create content that can be picked up and used by AI. And then you come off as a true source that AI engines will utilize. If I had to do it all over again and I only had one lead source, I would focus on creating content for my customer, knowing exactly the type of content that customer wants, and then making sure that it's distributed across all of the AI engines, because I feel like that's where people are going to go from now on. That's where they're getting their information. And now it's no longer going to Google, typing in business phone system and then paying to get on that list. Now it's who should I go buy my phone system from? And then boom, you're going to come up to the top of the list. So I would do everything in my power to go after that and to get ranked really well inside of those AI engines.
Yeah, we're moving from this world of like SEO to GEO, search engine optimization to generative AI engine optimization. So nice. All right. I love talking books. You and I both are avid readers. Aside from, of course, your business growth playbook, what are your other top favorite business books?
There's one that's called the $1 trillion Sales Coach. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's about Bill Campbell and his relationships with Apple, like Steve Jobs and everybody inside of Silicon Valley. I think that just teaches you how to be a leader inside of an organization and make sure that your voice is heard, but also understanding how to work with different personality types. So I love that one. Tim Grover has a book. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but it's called Unstoppable. And he was the physical trainer for Michael Jordan, Dwayne Wade. And he talks about what is it that these guys had? What are those intangible things that he could identify in all of these players that he worked with? I think it relates really well to business, and it helps you identify the right type of leaders when you're trying to create different parts of your business, whether it's customer engagement, marketing, lead generation, etc.
Nice. All right. Who was one of your unlikeliest mentors?
It may sound weird, but it was actually one of my sales guys who was incredibly intelligent technologically. He could run a demo and he could figure out technology so easily. It just came naturally to him. And I always admired that about him. Even though like he reported to me, I admired how he could go in and understand what a customer needed, duplicate the solution inside of the product. And I would just constantly work with him because I recognize that as a great skill. And so that's actually how I became better at demoing technology, which was one of my weaknesses. And so you can find mentorship in people above you, people that you meet outside of work, but also you can find mentorship a little bit based off of the people that you lead.
And again, coming back to that theme that I've heard a few times here, Shawn, of leadership, how great is it you found mentorship from, someone that reports up to you, right? There's so many places we can learn. I love that. And that's why I love that question as well. All right. So to recap for our listeners, you moved from a plateaued 8-figure business where the team was working hard but lacked alignment to a clear strategy of tightening your qualification, adding tiered service levels, and leveraging channel partners to quadruple your revenue and reach that doorstep of a 9-figure business. Love it. And for our listeners who want to learn more about you, Shawn, where should they go right now?
So right now I'm just posting on LinkedIn. That's really where you can find me. So if you go to Shawn Boehme with Pantera Networks on LinkedIn, you'll find my page. I post about sales leadership and then also about the technology that we offer as well. But really the core is, taking an average sales guy and really trying to get them to be a top 20% producer.
Nice. Well, that's also where you will most often find me on LinkedIn. So look out for both of us there. I enjoy a lot of the stuff you share regarding sales leadership. So thank you for doing that. And Shawn, thank you for joining us and sharing about your journey. You've made some big moves and really seen the fruits of that labor. And I appreciate you sharing that story and journey with us today.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. Quick reminder, hit that subscribe button right now so you can get more episodes when they come out automatically. And remember to leave that rating and review right now.